I'm going to talk now about IPSGA. IPSGA is a way of using a methodical system to get you to any kind of hazard or junction, roundabout, or even an overtake. It's a system of motorcycle control that's used in Police Riders Handbook called Roadcraft. So what does it stand for? As you can see, IPSGA, IPSGA. Information, position, speed, gear, and then acceleration. If we have a look at IPSGA as a way of dealing with any problem in front of us, we'll always start with the information phase, which is looking forward, using good vision, looking ahead, and seeing what's going on in front. And the way that we do that is by using a little mnemonic here called TUG, which means take, use, and give. So we take on information ahead of us by looking forward, having good vision, good awareness and good planning, and then we use that information to make a plan. The plan that you make must be flexible, and basically a flexible plan will mean that you can deal with any situation that develops or changes on the route in or on the approach to the hazard. And then if possible or necessary, we can give information to other road users, and that might be in the way of indication, using your brakes, looking over your shoulder, or even using the horn or an arm signal to suggest to people that you're either turning left or you're slowing down or whatever it may be. But that information stage is done in a split second while you're looking forward and observing ahead into the hazard that you're approaching. The hazard that you approach could be anything, a junction perhaps, or a roundabout, or a bend. So a left and right hand bend would use the information stage on the approach and use the IPSGA mnemonic to get you into the correct position, in the correct gear, travelling at the correct speed before you arrive at the hazard. And if you have a look at the system here, the hazard comes in between these two areas here, which is gear and acceleration. So the whole system is actually used to deal with this hazard that might only be a very small area in comparison to the amount of time it's taken to sort the bike out, get yourself ready to deal with it, and then afterwards we can then accelerate away. So without going into too much depth about the whole process, we're then going to look at the information stage leading into the correct road position. So what would happen, as an example, going into a right hand bend, we'd see the bend, we look forward, we assess what's going on, and then we move into position. The same as if we was moving into an overtake, we'd look forward, we'd assess the situation, and then we start moving into an appropriate position. The position could be anywhere in the lane that was safe. So basically the road position is going to be because of the road situation, the weather conditions, the road surface, and also your ability. So positioning is always for safety. So remember, the safest position is always correct, but the correct position, i.e. by the book, is not always the safest. So position for one person may be slightly different to somebody else's because of ability, because of awareness of the road surface, or even just because of what one person sees as a bigger danger than somebody else. Next phase is speed. So the speed might need to be reduced. We could keep the same speed depending on the hazard, but in most cases the speed needs to be reduced by using brakes and gears. So the correct braking sequence would be to turn off the power. If there's someone directly behind you, perhaps using a little bit of front brake to shine the light up, and then if necessary a little bit of rear brake, and then using both brakes in conjunction with each other to slow the speed of the bike down. As we slow the speed of the bike down, we then need to match a gear appropriate for the speed of the motorcycle. So let's have a look at the gear in a little bit more depth. By being in a high gear would mean that we possibly have low engine revs, and there'd be a necessity to brake quite often if you are running into things a little bit too fast. If you was in a low gear, the engine revs may be extremely high and the bike would be very responsive. So as you turn the power off, you're going to lose a lot of engine speed or a lot of physical speed as the engine slows the bike right down. So as you turn the power off, you get that feeling of everything just lurching forward, and it becomes uncomfortable riding in a low gear by going on and off the throttle with excessive throttle control. And what would happen is the bike is more like a seesaw as we accelerate and lift the front up, and as we brake by turning the power off, and we get that rocking action that's quite aggressive. So the idea is to have a much smoother operation on the bike, and by being in a mid-range gear, and the example there is if we've got 10,000 RPM as an example, then if we was in a mid-range gear using the rev range, if we use say third gear, and that would be between 3 and 7,000 RPM, that would give you enough throttle control to accelerate and decelerate by just using throttle sense or acceleration sense. So by being in a gear that is responsive by acceleration or deceleration, we get rid of the need to keep braking all the time. So perhaps just riding one gear lower than normal and then feel that kind of acceleration phase by rolling the power on and rolling it off to control the speed of the bike without needing to keep using the brakes all the time. That's something we can discuss in a little bit more depth when we see what kind of bike you're riding and the style of riding that you actually do. So coming down to speed and gear phases, then we kind of use them in conjunction with each other, and we make sure that this phase here is completely finished and we're ready to approach and negotiate the hazard. So we finish with the gear phase and then we go into the hazard. Remember, if we're looking into a hazard, we need to assess what's going on, we need to make decisions, and then there needs to be an action plan as well. So the hazard itself, it may be just a couple of seconds as I deal with a hazard. As an example, a parked vehicle at the side of the road is a hazard. It may be I move position, I don't need to lose speed, I don't need to change gear. I run past the hazard and then the hazard is finished quite quickly before I then move on. There might not even be time or need for an acceleration phase because I haven't taken any speed away on the approach. That all comes down to the good information that we take on board with good planning and good awareness, and then dealing with the hazard as I arrive there. But the example is here, we've slowed down, we've come down in our speed, we've dropped down in our gears, and we then deal with the hazard. The plan has got to be flexible, and the information stage never stops, it just overlaps everything that we do all the time. So during the information phase, I may well make decisions to change what I'm doing, and that way, we discussed it earlier, that when I use that information, I have to have a flexible plan. So just moving on now to the acceleration phase, which is the last section of IPSGA. Once I've dealt with the hazard, I may well have slowed down, so I've finished with the hazard and then I accelerate back to road speed. The other thing I may do is keep an even speed or the same speed as I approach another hazard. So while I exit a corner or exit the hazard, I'm looking ahead, planning forward, and then looking for the new position for the new hazard. Remember, the acceleration phase isn't just about putting on the power and accelerating away. It's about deliberate throttle control. If I need to increase speed, then I can increase speed by gentle rolling on of the power on the throttle. If I need to keep an even speed or the same speed, then obviously just holding the throttle steady. Remember, if you are cornering, the speed of the bike would slow down through cornering forces, so maybe a little bit of acceleration to maintain the same speed. And if I could see another hazard going on in the future, then I might even need to decelerate and reduce speed further as I go towards the next hazard. But again, just remember, the information stage overlaps everything, and the information stage will constantly change while I'm riding. I hope that explains everything. If it doesn't, write down some questions and ask on the day, and then we'll discuss this a little bit deeper and look at what kind of riding that you do look at how you position and how you use the word IPSGA to deal with the hazards ahead. It may well be that you don't use that at the moment, but that's part of the process to develop and learn new skills.